My name is Melanie Freese, and for the past 38 years, I have been Associate Professor at Hofstra University in Library Sciences. I love to teach, so even when I was a little girl, I would line my dolls up and I would teach them what I had learned in school that day. So in essence, it reinforced what I learned, but it also gave me experience in conveying that knowledge. Although they were inanimate objects, it gave me a great practice in doing it and sort of honing my desire at some point to be a teacher. My other great love at the time when I was a child, my father was a surgeon and a general practitioner, doctor, and he had the office in the house. And it was really a great temptation for me as a child to bring my dolls in there and also practice medicine while I was teaching. So I was in a conflict as to what I really wanted to do with my life. But at some point in church, I found myself becoming a helper in the Sunday school, and I was given my first Sunday school class to teach when I was 14, and that sort of solidified my desire to pursue an educational career. So when I graduated from high school, I attended Hofstra University, and I decided to major in elementary education, and I received my bachelor's degree in 4 years in elementary education, and then I went on to get my master's degree in elementary education. And at the time when I received that degree, there was a lot of teachers on the market, so it was very difficult to get a job. I did manage to get a job, but there were so many teachers that they had too many, and it didn't work out that was a viable option for me. And in as much as I had to support myself and make a living, I went to an employment agency, and they actually sent me on a job interview to Adelphi University, and they sent me to the library, and I found myself working in the library. As an undergraduate at Hofstra University, I lived in the library to get my academic degrees, and I loved being in a library. But once I found myself working in one, it dawned on me I really enjoy doing research, and I enjoy being surrounded by books. So while I had a support staff position at Adelphi, I decided to go on and get a second master's degree in library science. So it was a career change, and I found myself working in a library, and that became a second love, although I am still a teacher, and I teach at Sunday school, where I have been teaching since the age of 14 in my church. My family was an excellent support system. They mentored me, they encouraged me in all my dreams and hopes. My mother was basically wanted to be a teacher, but the Depression came, so she had to find a job, and she had to give up the dream of becoming a teacher. But she was always a teacher at home. She was really an excellent teacher. She taught me before they had anything called preschool. At the age of 3, she taught me my numbers, my letters. She got a blackboard for me. She sat with me, and she was essentially a preschool teacher before they even had such a concept. My father was a physician. Very often around the kitchen table, he would bring the medical journals to read during meals. And I would sit there with my book, and the two of us were driving my mother crazy because we kept reading and eating at the same time instead of engaging in conversation. Before my mother was married, she eventually worked her way up to a vice president of a construction company. At one point, before she was married, she supervised 200 hard hats. She was very pragmatic, but she was a very smart woman. Although she only had a high school education, she was a lifelong learner, as you would call it today. And both my parents were inspirational to me in showing how important it is to have strong role models. And I strived most of my life to be a strong role model to others that I have encountered along the way. It's hard to pinpoint the actual big break, but I would say when I actually found myself in the library as a worker, and it dawned on me that some of the most pleasant years in my academic studies were spent in a library. You must remember at that time period, this was before personal computers, before cell phones, and before photocopiers. So you actually had to go to the library and take notes. You actually had to request a physical copy of a journal, and you had to read the article and take notes. You could not stand by a photocopy machine and photocopy. So I had literally reams and reams of index cards from note-taking. So to write papers, and they were required in almost every course, I had a shoebox full of note cards, like for every subject. So organizing my research was like a part of being a student at that time. So then when I found myself actually working in a library and seeing how things were organized, it triggered my interest in doing that and helping students to facilitate their research. So that's why I decided to go into that field, because I remember librarians were helpful to me. If I had a question, they would guide my research. Let me talk a little bit about technology, because it certainly has changed since I began in the field. When I began in the field, there was hardly any technology. Basically, you access the library materials through a card catalog. Basically, the new technologies didn't start at the reference desk. It started in the back office with having a machine-readable catalog. It's called the MARC record. And there were online bibliographic utilities, so libraries could share cataloging information. And we were, Hofstra and Adelphi at the time, were members of what is called, and it's still in operation today, OCLC, which began as a small consortium in Ohio to be an international database containing about 50 million bibliographic records. And libraries join this, and they have access to these records. And they also have an obligation, if they have something that's not in that particular catalog, to add an original record. So one of the jobs that I have there is to add records. And for an example, we have Hofstra students to get a doctoral degree, or in some cases a master's degree, have to write a thesis or dissertation, which is their original research. And they send a copy of that to the library so it can be added to the library collection. In the old days, it used to be a hard copy. Now it is in digital format. And there is, of course, no record in the OCLC database, so one has to be created. So you take the information in that thesis and dissertation, and you provide the bibliographic data, author, title, date of publication, number of pages, and then you provide access points. So give them subject headings so that students can access the materials in a particular area. And that is basically what I did 38 years ago, and I'm still doing today. The technology is totally different, but the process, the intellectual process, is basically the same and has not changed. I think the basic hindrance in as far as like the patrons are concerned with technology is they believe they don't need a library anymore because everything's on Google and I can just type in anything I want, and if I'm willing to search through a million hits, I can find what I want. One of the major functions of librarians or informational specialists today is to get the patrons into the library and say, look, there is a search strategy which you need to use. You don't want to get a million hits. I mean, most people do not want to search through thousands and thousands of hits. So we educate our patrons. Start with a very narrow search. If you want to find a book on the horseshoe crab, don't just type in crabs. Use the most specific search topic you can find. And also, we teach them something that's called Boolean searching, which is combining search terms, which you can do now. You're able to use keyword searching. And if you combine, horseshoe crabs and habitat, you will narrow down your search to manageable numbers. If you choose to narrow a search, you can always broaden it. So we teach strategies like that into dealing with the library collection, and also to point out to our patrons that not everything is in Google. A lot of the early books, public domain books now, have just not been digitized. So not everything is on the internet. Well, I consider my crowning achievement probably it's hard to narrow it down because I've set up over the years, libraries for people to spread the knowledge and the word. I set up a church library, which we didn't have. And once I got my master's degree in library science, I took a collection of books that were donated over the years and I organized them into a library for our patrons to use. I also started a children's library of educational materials to use in teaching the gospel message and the Sunday school lessons, which still exists to this day. But perhaps what I think even more important than this, when I was chair of Institutional Services Committee, which was part of the Nassau County Library Association, they wanted to set up a library at the Wayside Home and School for Girls, which was a residential facility for troubled girls from the ages like about 10 to 18. And these girls were troubled girls. In some cases, they were persons in need of supervision. They came from troubled homes, troubled backgrounds. They were in trouble with the law, and they needed to be sent to a residential facility. And attached to this facility, which was located in Elmont and run by the Salvation Army, they had a school, but they didn't have a library. They had no leisure reading for the girls. There was nothing for them to do. So the plan was that I, as chair of Institutional Services Committee, would come in and develop a library for these girls. And about a year later, we had a fully functioning library. It was basically built through donations. We managed to hire somebody as a part-time librarian who is still working at Hofstra. And I was very proud to say that many of these girls actually went on to college. And hopefully I had some small impact in changing their lives for the better. And unfortunately, through funding and various issues, that library is closed and that school is closed. But for the years it was there, I think it was really a breakthrough for the girls, and I'm very proud of that achievement and the hard work that it took, but it was worth every bit of time I spent on it. Let me give a little bit of advice. If you are interested in becoming a librarian, an informational specialist, an educator, if you want to be an academic librarian, it's almost a prerequisite to have a PhD or at least another specialized graduate degree. Because many of our librarians on an academic level have PhDs now. So they are an information specialist with library field, but they also have an academic expertise in a certain field. There are some people who have their degree in psychology, sociology, various academic disciplines, and they are able to relate to the students who may come in with a very technical question on a particular academic area. So I would say at least have another area of interest besides library science. I would also say, as just advice in general, is to follow your dream and not to give up. As much as possible, study as much as you can. Try to find mentors along the way, colleagues that will work with you. So mentoring is very important. You need to find a mentor, somebody willing to share what they've learned over the years. If I had to sum up my life in one word, which is a very difficult thing to do, I would use the word service. And service is an action word. It could be a noun, it can be a verb, but there's action involved. You're actually, librarianship and teaching is a service profession. They're both service professions, and they're serving a valuable purpose. You're providing information, you're providing education, you're providing so much. You're trying to meet all kinds of needs in the best way you can. And certainly my role model for service were both my parents. So that's why service is probably the one word I would use, because it's so all-encompassing, and basically it's what I have tried to do my entire career, is provide service. I would like to be remembered as a caring person, as a helping, loving, compassionate person that tried to make society a better place while I was a part of it, and to not be judgmental and expect people to, all be the same. We're not all the same. We're all different. And I think sometimes society today tries to make everybody robotic, stamped in the same mold. We are individuals. We're like snowflakes. Each one is different and unique and has a contribution. And I think we need to strive as much as possible to remember that and accept people for the talents and abilities and gifts that they bring that are unique, and work together to help one another to develop people to their fullest extent possible.